While we sleep, the guardians of the night take to the streets, having said goodbye to those they love. Each other knowing they may never say these words again, they face the evil that we run from. They dedicate their lives to those that would hate them because they wear the badge. They wear the badge not for the glory or recognition, but for the passion to help others. This is the LEO First Podcast. We'll talk to the men and women in law enforcement, those that have retired, those that keep the prisons secure, and anyone who's impacted by law enforcement. We'll peel back the curtain, and you'll get the real stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Every law enforcement officer has a story to tell. Get ready to hear from the men and women who put their lives on the line every day for their communities and their country. Welcome to the LEO First Podcast. Now, here's your host, Michael Laidler.
Hey everybody, it's your host, Michael Laidler, the LEO First Podcast. Folks, it is hot in Texas. If you haven't been outside, especially in South Texas, you would know how hot it is. However, the guest we have on today, she is not from Texas. She is from the Northwest. I'm going to give herself time to explain, but prior to us starting the episode, we actually talked about the temperature, and her hot days versus our hot days in Texas are different. On the other hand, my cold days are a lot different than her cold days. So what we're going to do, guys, we're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about law enforcement. We're going to talk about life. We're just talking about whatever comes up, our conversation that we usually have. But as you all know, one of the goals of this show is to humanize the badge. It's to let people know that we're people, we deal with things, and as we're people and we deal with things, we're also striving to make the profession better. We're striving to make people better, and that comes on different levels, whether it's leadership, wellness, staffing, financial means, whatever it is we're trying to touch on. And this episode is going to be no different from the others in that area. We're going to hit all these points, and we're going to drive home the idea that law enforcement is great. If you're in it, stay in it. If you're thinking about getting into it, it's a great place to be in. Or even if you've been in it in the past, we want you to promote it and understand all the things that you can go through and experience on the good side. Now, you guys heard me rambling enough. Without further ado, we're going to have our guest on, Marcia Harnden. And I did have to ask her how to say her last name correctly because I would have butchered it before, but she did tell me the phonetics behind it. And I'll let her tell you the phonetics behind it just in case if you want to reach out to her later and make sure you want to say her name correctly. Marcia, tell us a little bit about yourself so I can stop rambling.
Good morning or good afternoon to you, Michael, because you're a couple hours ahead of us here on the West Coast. So it's a beautiful, cloudy, drizzly morning in the state of Oregon. As Michael mentioned, we talked about the weather a little bit. We are enjoying our first taste of rain in the central Willamette Valley that we've seen in 3 months, which it's almost like Northern California in some respects, and getting some rain. We joke that Central Oregon, North Oregon has turned into Northern California, so to speak. So enjoying some rain this week. I'm glad to see it. I'm surrounded by grass fields that they've recently plowed. So we'll hopefully uncake about 6 inches of dust off of everything in my yard. That'll be good. And much lower our wildfire risk. We had a lightning storm. Get this, Michael, I don't know if you know of a concept called dry lightning, where we get these lightning storms that come through with very little rain. They might dump a little bit, but nothing like you guys have in the South. So we call it dry lightning, and they start all sorts of wildfires here in California, Oregon, and Washington. So it's crazy. But I am from Oregon, originally from Washington State. I did 26 plus years at the Bellevue, Washington Police Department. Very grateful for my time there. Went to the best university on the planet, the University of Washington. Go Dogs. So we were talking about the Pac-12 imploding as well. We won't get into the politics and money surrounding that, but sad to see the Pac-12 disintegrating. But made the move down to Oregon in 2020 because a change was needed. Didn't really like kind of some of the things that I was experiencing and seeing at my baby agency that had grown, almost doubled in size. The city doubled in size since I had been there. it was time to make a change. And this job in Albany, Oregon opened up. A couple people knew the city manager, so I got some input. He's a fantastic boss, one of the best bosses I've ever worked for. And that's really important to longevity in your career, good bosses above you. And I've been here since January of 2020. Had about 5 seconds of honeymoon before the world decided to implode a little bit with COVID. And then 5 months later, the death of George Floyd really basically turned law enforcement upside down. And I had a choice here with my command staff to really do some things to improve us, keep people employed here, keep them from leaving the profession. And we've had a little bit of success there. We're about 99% staffed. We're always going to be chasing that dragon, so to speak, keeping up with attrition. People retire, people decide, hey, I can't take it anymore. That's going to happen. Fortunately, I think the worst of attrition and departures is behind us after George Floyd. So it has been almost 4 years here in Albany, and don't regret 1 second of it, even with the hard times.
That's amazing. And one thing you said, and you said a lot of things. I always take my notes, and I know this is audio only, that when people see it, but if you ever look at me, if you ever see me looking down, it's not that I'm texting anybody. I'm taking a lot of notes. So, because I'm always thinking about what else we're going to talk about as we go on, because everybody knows it's very conversational. One thing that I heard that stood out, and I didn't look into this before, but your prior agency was in Bellevue, Washington. When I started in Border Patrol in 2009, and I worked there for about 4 years, I had people in my class that were assigned to the Bellevue Border Patrol area. If I'm not mistaken, I think they have their own Border Patrol station there in Bellevue.
No, I think you're thinking of another state. We're literally next door neighbor to Seattle.
Okay, yeah, there must be a Bellevue somewhere else.
Bellevues.
I thought it was Bellevue, Washington for some reason. I don't know why. And I don't know. Now you're gonna make me go look. I'm not looking now, because by the time I figure it out, it's gonna be like 3 days from now. So I'm not gonna do that.
Well, you need to let me know.
Yeah. No, I am curious now, because now I'm thinking about it. I think there was a Bellevue Border Patrol station there or somewhere around there. And I think there was, I don't know. Needless to say, when you said that, I started thinking about, like, in your experience as a law enforcement officer. Obviously, you've instructed a lot. You've been in supervisory roles. You're now a chief of police in Albany. When it comes to bridging that gap of communication between agencies, do you think that's an important part of law enforcement when it comes to, like, trying to just work together on different avenues?
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to function the way we need to down here in Albany, especially even up in Bellevue. The city of Bellevue and Bellevue Police Department, very large, is 186 sworn officers in the most populous county in Washington State, and literally next door neighbors to the city of Seattle. So a good relationship with your partner agencies is a must, even in a big city. It's particularly important down here where I'm at now, because none of us are very large agencies. An odd fact for you is the city of Albany, Oregon is in 2 separate counties. We're separated by the Willamette River. We have 10 to 12,000 residents in Benton County, and the rest of the 60,000 or so in Lynn County. Very different counties politically, and the history here. We are a very busy police agency here. We're right along Interstate 5, which is the major interstate that runs from Mexico to Canada. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very busy town. We get a lot of activity that comes off of that. With that being said, we're an agency of 66 sworn. I have 100 total employees, basically 99.25. And we do have a regional SWAT team. We have a regional narcotics team. We have a regional major crimes team in both counties. So when really big things happen, we have to rely on each other to come together and do that work. And that's on a daily basis, as well as when really bad things happen. We had a law enforcement suicide here in 2021 involving the son-in-law of one of my employees. The officer who took his life was a deputy in Benton County. And so we really had to rely on each other to take each other's calls for a little bit and just get everybody through this. We've had a number of fairly big murder investigations, officer-involved shootings, where we all come together and help. And in the state of Oregon, it is state law that you cannot investigate your own officer-involved shooting. You have to have an outside entity. In our case, we have agreements in place, and that works out pretty well. But that really comes down, Michael, to daily relationship management between the sheriffs. I have two sheriffs and the fellow police chiefs, and making sure that you're looking out for each other and having those tough conversations when you need to, but having a good relationship. And I would be willing to say have friendships with these people as well.
And, it's crazy because leadership starts at the top. And when you're a deputy, you're an officer, you work in the jails, when you see that your leaders can work together in different avenues, whether it's a suicide or just calls for service, whatever it might be, for me, it trickles down. Because sometimes what we will say, especially when I was a patrol officer, and you probably felt this way at times too, it's like, well, I have a great relationship with the county, but my sheriff and that chief of police, they're going at it to each other. So for you guys to have that relationship, it lets me know, like, if I was in the lower ranks anywhere in your department, like, hey, it's okay to branch out and build friendships with other people because you never know what you're going to need. And one of the things I know you're big on at your agency is culture. That's how you have 99.2% employees, because the culture you have built has been so strong. What other things are you doing right now to continue to build the culture? Because I know one number you said that was really cool is that since you got there in January of 20, that you've hired 45 employees out of 100. So turnover is there, but you're doing something right. Like it's and you say you're small, but there's agencies throughout this nation that's a lot smaller than 100 overall. There's some that I've talked to that have 6, and they're struggling to keep their 6. So what are you guys doing? What have you guys doing? What do you continue to do to kind of build that culture?
It's a combination of things. You have to build a mechanism to attract people back to the profession, which is very honorable. I've been in law enforcement for 30 plus years. Wouldn't do anything different. I was actually heading towards a teaching degree. I have a bachelor's degree in U.S. history and speech communication. But got into law enforcement and haven't really looked back. And so it's very honorable. There's a lot more to law enforcement than law enforcement. It's public safety. It's taking care of people who can't take care of themselves, problem solving. It's very different than when I started. We're about 25% of our calls are mental health calls. We have a huge problem there. And then just keeping people coming to the profession. So we embarked on an effort mostly through social media because we're a very strongly embraced the 21st century policing model, which came out of Ferguson. And in it, it talks about the power of social media. And so we've built a very strong social media following up until TikTok banned us about a month or so ago. We had 850,000 followers on TikTok.
Wait. Y'all all right. So guys, I want y'all to understand that me and Marcia, we met on LinkedIn a couple of months ago. And then I had the privilege of hearing her speak at the FBI National Academy just July 30th, I want to say. Yeah. And when we were there, you guys y'all had your TikTok channel running, right?
Yep.
The videos were amazing. Like I saw this. I was like, this is so cool. Like she's taking this to the level that it needs to be at, because one of the complaints I always had in law enforcement is that we only want to talk to the public when something's wrong. We're not building layers of confidence in them. So when something happens, like someone escapes or you have a bad shooting or whatever might be considered negative, you have no money in the bank that they can withdraw from. So what I saw with you guys was that your TikTok, I was like, this is actually cool. This is how you're going to attract Generation Zs, the end of Ys, whatever the next generation is. Like you're trying to build on what they like. So, okay, sorry, that threw me off. Okay. So you guys got banned. So tell us about this. What was this? Because agencies need to be doing this.
Yeah, I tell you, I mean, I must be old, because sometimes it makes me cringe a little bit, but I do very much understand the power of social media and support our staff. It's not just our PIO, but all of our officers. You've seen the videos. Most of them are reposted under the new account. We can't get TikTok to tell us why they banned us.
Wow.
It might have been the fact that we might have been growing too quickly. I don't know. Who knows? But they have fun doing it. And so you'll see officers make fun of themselves, and do funny little lip syncing and things like that. And it shows us as human. And like I told you before we started, I interview every employee before they go to background.
Yes.
And I asked, especially the entry level employees, whether they're sworn or non-sworn, is how did you find us? And it's almost always social media. So there's a lot of power behind that. In making this place externally facing, that is a great place to work, because it is a great place to work. We were just having, I went to a detective meeting this morning to hand out a tenure service award to one of our detectives, and they have trivia as part of their Monday morning meetings. And there's lots of laughing and things. And I've heard that before when you've had visitors come through. They go, wow, you hear a lot of laughter in this building. So how do we capture that and send it outward so we attract good people? Social media is one way. Then also making sure that people coming through don't feel like they're a number, that they're an asset from the minute they get here. So they're assigned a mentor when they make it through the oral board process. They're assigned a mentor that will walk them through what the hiring looks like, because most people may not know that law enforcement is a little bit daunting to get through the application and hiring process.
It is.
And we don't even have polygraphs in this state. We're a non-polygraph state. So just making sure that they feel welcome when they're here. And we've had people that have applied to multiple police departments or agencies. And so they're in some part of the process. And I've heard continually, I pulled out of those other processes because this place already felt like a home. And I cannot tell you how powerful that could be to new employees. And that's the same for laterals too. We have seen, I'm about on October 1st, about to hire a second female lateral or experienced officer. Got another one from Colorado, just because the reputation we have is a good place to work, that we take care of our employees. We have fun doing our work. We take the work seriously, but not ourselves. And so there's a big family atmosphere. So all of that sells. And then the other thing, Michael, is every employee here is a recruiter. So when they're at a shoplift call, or they're at Starbucks or wherever, and they see a good candidate, they go into recruiting mode.
So those three areas, you said social media, you said assigning a mentor, and then ensuring that every employee understands their role as recruiting.
Correct.
Is that part of the mission statement? Is that part of the vision? Like, how do you, because a lot of times what I've seen, and anybody that's listening, a lot of times we see at the top where leadership wants these things in place, but it takes multiple layers in the hierarchy to ensure it actually gets implemented. From where you're at, you're the chief, you're the top of the pyramid, so to speak. How do you ensure that everybody's hearing the message from the top to the bottom?
That's a great question. We do. So we embarked on a strategic plan, had great training from a fellow chief and mentor of mine, who really helped me prepare for this role and position. We started putting together a strategic plan. And one of our strategic priorities is to build a high-performing, robust workforce, enhanced training, wellness, and incentivizing good work. So if you recruit a lateral police officer, this agency, the city will give you a $250 cash bonus. If you recruit an entry-level person, we give you a gift card to a local eatery or something like that as a thank you for recruiting. But that's not what's selling it. It's they like working here. So I'm relying on the influencers beneath me to really go out and sell that message. and it is working. I think if I just pushed it and didn't have buy-in in the middle levels of leadership, or even the informal leaders, your
Correct.
non-rank, not positional, it would be a bigger struggle. But they're bought in, and so we do an annual survey every year as a part of our strategic planning.
Smart.
It's anonymous. It goes out through this wonderful tool that other police agencies will know as Power DMS. It helps us monitor our policies and that. It's anonymous, so it goes out to every employee, and it can just tells our accreditation manager how many people have taken it. But we are very strict about not having people identify what work group, and you can't take it twice or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so we've the first year we did it, the percentages were 60%, 70%, something like that, which is still high for an employee satisfaction survey.
Very high.
We were up around 85% this last time, almost 90. And one of the questions is rate the police department as a great place to work. And 99% of the people answered yes, that Albany Police is a great place to work. And so that tells me, and also the comments, we allow them to make comments about what would make it better. And they put in comments. I don't know who makes them. I just know that an employee makes them. So that tells us. And also, my door's closed right now in my office, but whether I'm here or not here, my door is always open. So a lot of chiefs lock their door at the end of the day. Mine's always open. And I do that strategically as a psychological thing to say, hey, I'm always here and approachable. So again, making sure that they feel that they have a voice. In our regular management meetings, we made a decision because Oregon passed some grooming requirements or about hair and things like that. We had gender neutral language, and we had made some policy changes that were not very popular, but we listened and reversed them. So making sure that they have an avenue to demonstrate leadership in the department. So that's a great thing for me to see. It makes my job easy, but it's just, again, goes back to relationships too. We taking care of our people, empowering them to make decisions. One of my leadership expectations, I put them out every year, but they just tweak a little bit depending on what we're dealing with.
Right.
Is start with yes for the leaders. When somebody comes to you with an idea, start with yes. We're so quick with budgets and that to say no, but start with yes. And we've been able to do some pretty amazing things with that.
And it's funny you said that. So, and I'm gonna just jump right on this. Starting with yes is such a different kind of concept, so to speak, because you're already saying, hey, we're gonna figure out how to do this. Like, we're not like when you're starting with that, you're telling that person like, hey, let's figure out how we can do it versus let's look at the excuses. You're saying, well, no, we're not gonna look at excuses. We're gonna figure out, well, where can we pull money from here, or where can we rearrange a time from that, or what other resource we can get. So I know for me, if I know I have even a random idea, I might be able to come to you or your leadership team and like, hey, can we do something like this? If you're like, hey, yeah, let's figure it out, then that makes it more empowering on my side, because that means I'm going to bring it to the table more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They come up with some ideas about how to do things. They wanted enhanced wellness, but we have a brand new building, but we didn't have a space for it. We kicked the drug detectives out and put them in another part of the building and put a gym in. And they're like, well, we don't have any money for this. Well, let's go out and ask the public. We have a very supportive community here. And two people donated and put in a professional gym, $35,000 worth of equipment.
Wow.
The city didn't pay for anything other than I pay for the cable TV and the painting. Everything else was donated. And so that's the payoff for those, one, starting with yes, and two, and having good relationships with our community, because they'll step up when we need them as well.
Yeah, but and Marcia, that's part of cultivating relationships at all levels. Once again, I knew where I was leading with this question earlier, but when we have open communications with other agencies, other individuals, as a law enforcement society, we're gonna work with them again, no matter if we want to or not. So when you need something, let's say you're just like you said, you're building a gym. you just ask the community, hey guys, this is what we're trying to do. If anybody can help, we'll take anything because we're trying to make it new. And look at what they're able to do, because they know they want healthy law enforcement, physical, mental, psychological. And a lot of people are more than happy to help. And in other industries, they tend to make a little bit more than we do in law enforcement. So sometimes some of them are philanthropists in nature. So they're finding ways to spend money, especially for good cause. So the fact that you guys are able to reach out and just pull someone else in was, I mean, how did your staff feel when they saw that equipment coming in?
Yeah, well, this is a couple of the donors were known to us. One in particular is very supportive of community of efforts and community partners, like the YMCA and things like that. And he doesn't want any recognition for it and all that stuff, even though we named the gym after him. But again, those relationships matter. You said something about you might have to work with these groups again. There's certainly people that don't like me. I don't necessarily like them, but never burn a bridge that you might have to cross later. And always keep open lines of communication, because we're human beings. We're not going to always agree on things, but don't burn bridges that you may have to cross later. It may feel good at the moment to torch somebody or some situation, but it's just going to come back on you later. So it's that karma effect, so to speak. But I wanted to come back a little bit to the importance of relationships. You've mentioned it a couple times. Some of the best leadership advice I got early when I was beginning to promote came from somebody at Bellevue who was not good at relationships. And he told me that was a lesson he learned too late in his career. He said, as you rise up in the organizations, less and less about the technical knowledge. I don't know every single specific detail of every one of 99.25 employees, but I do know that relationships matter. And if I take care of them and they feel that they're cared for and appreciated, they're going to work harder. So as you rise up, it's less and less about the technical knowledge and all about relationships. And if you don't make relationships or can't make relationships work, you're going to fail.
And it's weird because I tell people, and so when you're not in leadership or you're at lower levels of leadership, you don't understand what the term CEO really means, or chief executive officer. You don't really know that if you've never been anywhere. But when you start looking at corporations, you start looking at big agencies, a lot of those individuals didn't start at the bottom, so to speak, of their organization. They weren't a police officer. They weren't a jailer. They weren't a secretary. They joined the agency at the higher level, but they were brought in specifically because they knew about relationships. They knew how to build people, because that's universal across every industry. And when you realize that as you grow in your leadership, you know that, hey, I may not know what happens on every single street in Albany Police like I knew in Bellevue, but what I do know is that people want to grow, people want support, people like open door policies, people want people that just care for them. That's what people want. And if you know how to do that, you're going to succeed, because you're going to have to cross that bridge with everybody at some point. And I mean, more than likely. And if you say, well, I'm never going to see that person again, that'll be the person you see the week after. Next,
yep, indeed.
Right?
Indeed. Yeah. There's been a couple of rough patches. We are not going to please everybody in the public. And I've had to have conflict with certain community partners. A school superintendent was one in particular. And even though I was very upset about how this person had handled a certain situation, I knew that how I went about that, one, was being watched by other community leaders. And it was really not necessary to torch that person. It's always better to sometimes take the higher road, speak your piece, but do it in a way that doesn't tear the person down. And that person's behavior and their actions ended up ending their career here locally. But I walked away from it, and our staff here walked away from it knowing that, hey, we were the bigger people in this whole discussion.
And it takes time to realize that, like, I'm with you, and people don't believe me when I say it, but I don't like everybody. I know I smile a lot. I have a great time meeting people, but I don't like everybody. I truly, there's some people's personalities and there are ways that I do not like. And what I realize as a leader, that doesn't mean I can't work with them, because they're still in a role that I may need, not for myself, but for my agency or my team or the people I'm leading or even my family. So I understand that, like you, that you have to keep those relationships going. Is it easy to burn people sometimes, especially when you have them with their pants down, so to speak? Yes, of course. Yes, you can. But is that who you want to be perceived as a leader? Because once again, if you do it, your troops are going to do it as well. They're going to say, well, Marcia, she called him an a-hole, or she insulted her. And now they're like, well, we can all do it. So that's one leading by example 101.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at my signature line, we'll put our email and our signature and office phone numbers on there. I have a Latin saying on there called Ductus Exemplo. And it means in Latin, lead by example. And I'm very much a believer in that, yeah, I might be tired and I might be a little bit cranky. And I just want to go home or whatever the case may be. But everything I do, I know my people are watching it. So I've got to have set that example that I'm going to hold them to. And I've got to be willing to also do that same thing. So, and that comes to being humble and owning your mistakes when you need to. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm a human being. Michael is a human being, and the 99 employees here are human beings. They're going to make mistakes, and give them the grace to make mistakes, but also give them the tools to get beyond those mistakes. So often we look at punishment. So one of my challenges here is when we see performance take a dive, whether it be a brand new officer in FTO or somebody who's tenured, is, hey, we had a great performing employee for X number of time, and suddenly we're taking a left turn and things are not going well. We have to address that behavior and hold people accountable, but why is that occurring? Delve deeper into why that is an issue. Police misconduct almost always, serious misconduct almost always has some connection to personal wellness and choices.
Perfect. Great transition. And you probably knew I was going to talk about this next, because this has been my wheelhouse, so to speak, over the last 2 years. Now, I love leadership development. I love developing people as leaders, but I really love developing people as people, because so many times in this uniform, or if you were in the name badge, whatever you want to call it, you identify yourself as the organization. And the more you do that, you lose yourself. And then when bad things happen, you don't know how to defend yourself because you forget why you're there. So when we're talking about wellness and law, specifically, especially on this show, law enforcement wellness, what are some things to you that you have seen that you've had to do in your agency and your role as a leader to improve wellness amongst your people?
Well, I'm going to tell a little story. So when I got here in 2020, I inherited a custodial death case. And I had employees that were just coming back, maybe a week before I started here, just coming back to work after being on administrative leave for almost 2 months. And that's where things really went to the top of my list as far as wellness, is I got to know employees. People kept coming back to that they didn't feel appreciated or taken care of. They're left out on an island. And that really left a mark on people. They had not even done a critical incident debrief by the time I started here. Wow. It was about a month in before we made that happen. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And wellness is a hot topic in law enforcement. And I think that the agencies not doing it well aren't doing anything at all, because they're probably too busy in crisis mode. And that's not a good place to be. Most agencies that I've seen, and I know this because I teach it on behalf of the state here, and I talk to various agencies about it. It ranges from, oh, we have a wellness app, oh, we have a couple options, to the apex of, cardiac screening. I mean, you were in Denver when I talked about the cardiac screening that we did for staff.
Correct.
We paid for that out of general fund money because we're short-staffed at the time and had the surplus to do it. So it runs a gamut. My advice to people, if you're really engaged in wellness, and the payoff is good culture, is that people feel taken care of and appreciated. They can raise their hand and say, hey, I need some help. And we've seen that as the byproduct of a good program here, is that we've had people who would not normally ever be thought of to say, hey, I need some help, step up and say, I need some help. And if we could save one person, then it's worth all the effort in it. But a wellness program really needs to hit all the domains: financial, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, nutritional, however you want to list it, because there's all sorts of different ways to do that, is making sure that you're touching all of that and identifying what is the biggest wellness need in your agency. And when I got here, it was mental health support. So we have a policy on critical incident leave. So an employee either directly involved or indirectly involved that is adversely affected by a critical incident has the opportunity to take time away. On the back end with HR, it looks like administrative leave, payroll wise, but we made sure and had a wall between administrative leave in policy from critical incident leave, because there's a stigma with admin leave. Admin leave means I did something wrong, I'm under investigation, things like that. Critical incident leave is the opportunity for the employee to step away from work for a day, 2 days, 3 days. Generally, it's 3 is what we'll give them if they're directly impacted by it. All the way up to they need a couple weeks off to go into some inpatient treatment for PTSI or something that they've been exposed to. For the longer term critical incident leave users, so a week or two or longer, we ask for a reentry plan and a follow-up plan. I don't need to know the details of it because some of it's protected, but just what are you going to do to make sure that you're on a healthy path? And we ask them for that. And I have buy-in from our HR director, our insurer for the city, things like that. It really has helped people feel appreciated and come back healthier. That's the extreme of it. But as I said in Denver, try one thing, identify really where your agency is at, and try one thing. If that doesn't work, try something else. Just keep trying. With budgets and all that stuff, people go, whoa, I don't have the budget to do the cardiac screening. I think if you go out and ask for help, you'll get it. I think that's really an important thing to do. So look at the gamut of all of the domains of wellness, and then work on those individual areas within your agency. But you got to know what's your baseline, where you're at. That's hard to do in agencies like Dallas, Houston, Chicago, New York, where you have thousands of officers. But it can be done, because what you do is you get your leadership layers to get bought in, and then they do that work amongst their individual work groups. Because if you run a precinct, then you're the police chief for that precinct, and you have leaders beneath you. And so you just start working there. And in our case, the wellness now it's one of our core values for the agency is wellness, because I know that healthy staff are going to have healthy interactions with the community. Yes. But get your informal leaders, people that are highly respected, engaged, and on board. And if they're out there selling it, it's really gonna take off.
It's because it's at all levels. And it's funny when you talk about the size. It's an assistant chief out of Dallas PD. His name's Ruben Ramirez. He actually implemented a program called Checkpoints, which is similar to I know it's not completely the same thing, but the concept is pretty similar to your critical incident leave, where when something happens, him and his team, they follow up on, say, monthly with the staff. Like they're not going overboard. They're just checking in on staff, say, hey, how's everything going? Is everything all right? Can I help you? And that's that. They have a list of calls, they have a list of incidents, and they just your major, you responded to a homicide or you go to a suicide call. It's calls at all different types of levels that they've deemed that maybe has a mental health impact that you just may need someone to follow up. And he said that when they first started the program, which is about 18 months old now, it's at least a year old, that they had very few participants, but every month he has seen an increase in people taking part of it because the culture now sees that it's okay. So what you're saying at a, so to speak, smaller agency, it could be done at larger ones because Dallas Police Department, they're actually a pretty large agency. They're not like a 10 or 15 person department. They're in the thousands of officers. So it can work. So what I like what you guys are doing in Albany is you're showing that you could do it at a small agency. And then Ruben, he's showing that you could do it at large. So all the ones in between, it's harder to me, and this is me obviously as a business owner, as a speaker, it's harder for me to hear you say that, oh, well, this can't be done, because I can give you a scale just by talking to you two. I can say, well, if you have 105 officers or you guys have 800, there's no reason why you guys can't fall in between somewhere. But I think it comes from the culture, from everybody. It comes to leadership. It comes to what the focus is. It comes to what people really want to implement and go forward. So if you're talking to another chief of police, because I know you're involved with Oregon Chiefs of Police, and I know you're involved. I mean, and folks, when she says she's an instructor, I looked at her profile. There's at least 6 different organizations that she's part of, that she does instruction on, that says from the time she started till present, and there's several that's all over. So she's right. She really does take like pride in teaching and instructing. So she's just not giving lip service. She's actually doing it. So when you speak to other people at your level, because that's always different than speaking to someone that's at a first line supervisor and officer, how do you convince them, or how do you try to convince them that this program can work for their agency?
Well, that's a tough one, because I don't ever want to be that person that's going to say, you need to do this, you need to do that.
Correct.
I guess I would ask them a question is, what do you think your biggest challenge is? And what's the biggest thing standing in your way of fixing that challenge? And whether you're at our biggest agency in Oregon is either going to be Oregon State Police or the Portland Police Bureau. They're very large organizations, and Portland does really good work around wellness. Every employee gets wellness time every day.
Wow.
So that figure out also, the next question is, what is going to work at your agency? Now, we've tried a lot of things. Some have worked, some have not. Some have really stuck that are surprising. So I do appreciate that, especially our work around sleep. Because I think that's the biggest cancer, so to speak. And I use that word very seriously because it is linked to cancer. Lack of sleep is. How do you do that? I think you're in the room when I asked people who has their own restorative rest or nap policy, who allows their staff to take a nap on duty in a controlled environment. And one hand, I believe, went up in that whole audience. And there's probably 150
easily
people.
And it was the same guy that raised his hand for everything. So it wasn't like it was like different. Every question you asked that related to wellness and improving that landscape, it was. I remember that one person. I think you actually joked, like, really, like you have all this, and he was that one. But it was cool. But you're right though. But 1 out of 150, that is a disparaging number when you're looking at what you're saying. But yeah.
Well, we know that. And I asked him. I said, "What is your biggest challenge?" And a lot of times I hear sleep, and when I instructed the state training facility and we talk to middle managers, we go around and say, what is your biggest wellness challenge? It's usually in the first half hour of the class, and very few will say anything about sleep, because it's just not in their mindset. But by the end of the day, it's about a 6.5 hour session on wellness for middle managers. They'll come back, because we do a pretty big block on sleep, and we talk about Matt Walker's book on why we sleep. Mm-hmm. They'll come back and go, I said, what's your big takeaway from the day? And almost always, 80% of the people go, I don't get enough sleep. If they're getting under 6 hours of sleep, especially if you're a first responder, that's just going to lead to degraded health, higher cancer risks. Your mood, your interactions with people are going to be worse, your home life, not to mention everything else that's connected physiologically to lack of sleep. That health-wise, I think is one of the biggest threats that we have as first responders, particularly in law enforcement. So I'll ask a chief or sheriff, well, what do you think your biggest challenge is? And then if I don't hear certain things that I've heard multiple times from people at their own agencies. And I said, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And try things. But I'll never say, oh my God, the Portland Police Bureau sucks because they don't do this and this and this. I'm not going to be that person, because I'm not in that agency. I can control what I can control, which is making wellness here at Albany the best and be an example for others and helping others. We share our policies all the time. I frequently get a question about our dog, Bentley. You can see it because you're on video, but that's a dog bed behind me.
I was going to ask about that. I saw the dog bed. I was like, is that a dog bed? Yes, good.
Yeah. We have a station dog. He's a 2.5-year-old black lab named Bentley. And he was donated from a great organization called Working Dogs Oregon. And they donate the dog, do some basic training. And the dog, Bentley, lives here. So he has a kennel down in our records office. He has a kennel up in dispatch. He can go home with employees who need his services. And his whole job is to get and give love. And by far, one of the most impactful wellness tools that we've introduced so far, because somebody suggested, hey, have we ever thought about doing this? We should do this. And one of our partners nearby Oregon State University, they have a wellness dog named Cedar. Same kind of setup, and it works pretty well. But the big payoff, Michael, is the public engagement piece. So Bentley goes on all of our active shooter drills.
Wow.
So it brings down the anxiety of the staff and the kids, particularly coming out of COVID. And the social engagement between the police officer, Bentley, and the kids or teachers is uplifting. It makes them feel really grateful that the dog was there. People are smiling. So it's enhancing the mental health and emotional health of the officers as the dog is engaging in community. As we were out of school, we're on summer break, they took Bentley to our memory care facilities and engaged with some of the dementia patients. And time after time, we've gotten comments from the staff there going, you have no idea how much that made my day. To a police officer who sees everybody's crap all day long and goes to all these bad calls, and then they get to go along and see how much of an positive impact our role as the police and this dang dog named Bentley has on these people. It's that helps enhance their job satisfaction and their emotional wellness.
It's crazy because I used to be a canine handler back when I was Border Patrol, and I had a Belgian Malinois, and while he was a great worker, he was also great at home. And just his personality used to just light people up. So when I now go to other environments that have dogs, and as I see more of the therapy dogs coming out and service dogs, whatever title we want to give them, it's always a positive environment because dogs are always happy, or they at least seem happy. So when you take them on, like you said, you're taking them out there in different community events, different public relationship activities, or just when things are going on, that the dog is just different. And like I think you hit the nail on the head. Every program is going to have a different impact everywhere. There's not one shoe that fits all, because just because the dog works for you guys doesn't mean it's going to work for the next agency. It may not, who knows? But you got to try something. And I love the fact that you say you go in there like, well, what's your challenge? And what will work for you? Don't like not what works for me. I'm gonna share what works with me, but you may have tried this and it doesn't work. So what else can we do? And I think that's the question that is a great question to have, because it challenges chiefs of police, it challenges sheriffs, it challenges directors, whatever the highest level ranking is in that organization, to start thinking in their role as a visionary, what am I bringing to the table to enhance my agency in the wellness side? What can work? What will work? Doesn't mean everything will work, but as you try different things, that's what your staff's going to appreciate. Because they're the first thing, if you tried it doesn't work, they're going to say, oh, is that all you did? But next thing you know, you try 7 different things. They're like, wow, she's been trying everything. Because you don't know.
Yeah, I again, I'll keep trying stuff. The only criticism I will have is if you have a sheriff, chief, executive who just is not engaged in that at all, doesn't see the importance of wellness for their staff. One of the things that's worked really well here is that we've just accepted that us being in police, whether you work in records, dispatch, property evidence, or actually sworn, we are in the trauma business. We deal with people's traumas, whether their car got broken into and their grandmother's urn full of her ashes got stolen. That's a trauma for that person. And we always absorb that energy to actually going there and watching somebody commit suicide in front of you or having to shoot and kill somebody. That whole range of trauma. We see that every single day, and our staff absorbs that every single day. If there's a chief, sheriff, or executive that does not understand that, doesn't buy into the fact that that is a real truth, then I'm going to be critical of that, because that is the work that we do.
In your experience up to this point, if you had to say, let's say you've dealt with, let's say 100 chiefs of police, out of them, how many do you see that have like no buy-in whatsoever to wellness? If you just had to guess a number.
Out of 100, probably small handful, 5 or so.
That's good.
And it's usually because they're so narcissistic or egotistical. And they're everywhere. They don't get it. That unless it's about them, they don't see the need to do it. So there are those handful of people. Most often it's people, I don't know where to start, or I don't have a budget for this. Well, it's not reinventing the wheel, because most police agencies across the nation are at least trying it, some doing it really well. So you've got lots of material out there to steal, because wellness is all about stealing from each other. Our cardiac screening was about stealing from the Bend Police Department. The canine Bentley came from Oregon State. So you steal ideas and you try them. They don't work, they don't work. But to not do anything knowing what we have to put up with us in this work, I'm going to be critical of that, because that's our responsibility as leaders, especially as executive leaders in our agencies. We have a responsibility to take care of our people. And I know I've seen it. If we take care of our people, they're generally going to take care of business in the right way.
You're right, because once again, people want to see that you care about them. And it's actually very uplifting when you say out of 100, only really 5 to 10 really aren't really involved. But that shows where the mind of these leaders are. They want it, but there's some things that come up that is sometimes really, like, you're right, funding. Like, there's ways around it, but you have to be creative to find those ways. I mean, you're right. There's all types of funding. For example, I saw you're involved in HIDA. Like, there's things that organizations like HIDA can do to kind of help you out. Like, maybe not necessarily in one category or the other, but there's agencies for everything. There's literally federal grants for all types of stuff. It ain't just about getting cool cars, buying the newest holster, having the pristine training center that shoots the best bullets. It's about the wellness side, and there's money everywhere. You just have to you got to start with yes. Like you talked about before, like, okay, I know I have a wellness issue. How can I find an answer? Not like, well, I have a wellness issue, but I have nothing. Well, if you think like that, you will get nothing. But if you take the mindset of saying, yes, I'm going to grow, you're going to help yourself get to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the vast majority of agencies that are maybe struggling around having a good wellness program is they either don't know where to start, or they don't know how much is out there. You're right. The Department of Justice has a number of wellness grants through the COPS program.
They do.
Things like that. And in our case, when we did the Sigma Tactical Wellness, we paid for that for every employee, not just our sworn employees, but every employee to go through using monies that were saved from being short-staffed. But in most states, I know it's true of the West Coast, your heart attack, if you're a police officer or dispatcher, if you have a heart attack, it's presumed duty related. And the minimal amount of hospitalization for that, even if you just do stents and things like that, you're talking about $400,000. I spent $60,000 to screen all my employees. And we know that we did some interventions on folks. That's a great return on investment. So you're seeing your potential workers' comp claims drop off just by doing that screening, and you give people peace of mind. Sigma Tactical will be back this fall to do round 2 of our employees, and every 2 years we'll continue to allow screening for folks, and we allow spouses to go through. Now the employee has to pay for that, but we've had a number of spouses come through. So try something. You look at other ways to spend your budget. Now, I know there's going to be people that will listen and go, well, I don't have that much control over my budget. You'd be surprised how much control you have.
You do. That's true. That's true.
Usually if they allot you X amount of money, our annual budget's a little over $20 million a year. I have pretty much anything that's a discretionary fund usage. I have pretty much control over where that money is spent. We clearly know that we're not going to have to spend money on cars this year because Ford apparently can't make a police car this year. So we have money set aside for Ford interceptors that we're not going to be able to get, but whatever. So we'll find that we know that we have to have our portables replaced. And we know that we have some savings we were leaving one position vacant, a records position vacant right now because we're waiting for some legal stuff around firearms in the state to sort out. But that money, unused money, will go to screening for heart issues or employees. So chiefs of police, sheriffs do have some discretion over how their budgets are used. You don't have a lot of control over how much you get every year, but what you do get, you have control over what you use.
True. And what's cool about what you're doing, Marcia, you're not just doing it for your agency. You're not doing it for the different organizations you instruct for. You actually have your own company as well, which is the M3 Leadership Group. And I heard you guys talk about it, and it kind of dawned on my brain again, like, with all that, like, I know it's been out for about 5 years now, a little over 5 years when you guys decided to form it. What's been the driving force between everything you have going on as a chief to that? Because that's a lot of time that you're spending on all this training. So what drives you in the M3 Leadership Group as well?
That's a great group. Thanks for bringing it up. M3 is really original. The M stands for Mike, Marcia, and Michelle. There's 3 of us that started it. Michelle Bennett, who's the chief of police in Edmonds, Washington. Mike Johnson is a captain in Bothell, Washington. And then we've added Shannon Anderson here, one, because she's an extensive background in training and education. She helped to run the training academy in Washington. Our whole mission is to give tools to people that prepare them for promotion. So there's not a lot of courses out there that tell somebody like Michael or Marcia, here's what an assessment center looks like. Here's what they're looking for on sergeant promotionals. So we partnered with John Gray, who wrote a book called Be the Police Supervisor. And he sold us the content of the class. And we do an 8-hour class on how to prepare for promotion, not only the testing, but how to actually start your leadership journey. And we heard from people in that class that, hey, would really like to have a class, because when we were first sergeants, when I was first promoted, I knew how to approve paperwork and do timesheets and all that crap, but nobody taught me how to have difficult conversations, how to bring a team together in a cohesive way, what emotional intelligence was. Probably learned it a little too late in my life, things like that. And so the second class that came out of preparing for promotion was the first class. Building your leadership toolbox class builds on that and gives them, it's packed full. We usually go about 8.5 hours of all of these different areas just to give them a basic toolbox on how to be a leader. Again, and it's a little bit more. You have to put forth the effort, and we give them roads to move forward from there. I strongly recommend that they go through the FBI leader classes. They're fantastic classes for leaders. And then we also had a class with an interest on creating a class specifically for women. The path for women advancing their career, especially moving up in leadership. There's a huge challenge in getting women to promote within police agencies right now. and how do we help them along. So there's a class centered around females in public safety and how to advance their career. And that could be detectives or specialty assignment or promotion. So that's our commitment on M3. We don't make a lot of money. It covers our travel and our expenses, but we really are invested in the people that will replace us. We're all nearing the end of our career in law enforcement, and I'd love to be able to hand it off to good leaders behind me. So that's what M3 is all about.
But it goes back to everything we've talked about on this show. And guys, if you haven't realized it, or if you're just tuning in for some reason at the 45, 50-minute mark, for some odd reason, you just missed everything else. We've talked about leading by example. We've talked about continuously growing, whether it's either building relationships with other organizations or as a leader, realizing that everybody plays a role, creating recruiters out your own employees. Like it all comes around when you talk about M3 as well, because it just shows your dedication to your craft. It shows your dedication to leadership. It shows your dedication to building wellness, because all those things are important. And I'm with you, Martin. When my first time as a lieutenant, and that was the first supervisory role I had, well, formal title. I'm with you. I knew how to approve leave. I knew how to do the daily paperwork. I didn't know how to lead people. I mean, I was a decent conversationalist, but I didn't know how to give the right feedback. I didn't know how to delegate duties very effectively. So I wish I would have had a course on how to get ready for leadership, because at some point, everybody's going to get into that role that if they really want to, because with staff shortages everywhere in the world, with people that are going to retire, someone else has to enter these roles, and having some form of preparation, even if it's like, hey, I'm going to give you 8 hours on just how to get feedback. I'm just going to show you how to sit down one-on-one with your employee and boost them up, because there's too many older school mentalities that still that think they can bring military mindsets to law enforcement in a sense of we're going to break them down, but they don't build them back up. So we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to build people up. And I think what you guys provide in M3, just that first course of how to get ready for a promotion, for me, it goes a far way. Like what kind of, I know you talked about it briefly, but what are some of the comments or I guess testimonials you've heard from that particular class? Like that's really like hit you in the heart. Like, man, I wish I would have been doing this 20 years ago versus 5 years.
We love it. And at the end of the preparing for promotions class, we call them seminars, but whatever, it's you get the concept. It is that we ask them, when's your test coming up? And if you need any last minute advice, we're available to you. You have to pay for the seminar, but it goes beyond that, and we're happy to help. They might want to test out their verbal resume, because that's usually included in every promotional interview, is tell us about your career and why we should promote you, kind of thing. And we want to hear how they did on the test. And we've had some really shockingly great results from it. And I knew that from John Gray's book, because he used to teach the class and I sent my people through it a long time ago. But we'll have people send us emails and say, hey, came out number 1 and so took the class 2 and they came out number 3. And wow, thanks so much. That was huge. I wish I would have taken this class a long time ago. So that boosts us up. But the bigger thing is that we'll get emails from people saying, hey, I made the sergeant list 2 years ago and I took the class and I really want to prepare the next leaders. So can you guys come back and do another class at our agency? And so we're happy to do that. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is making it super easy for the agency to bring us in. If we make it difficult and cumbersome, they're not going to have us come in and help out their people.
That's true.
We do all the registrations. We do all of that. We supply all the materials. All they have to do is give us a space and a projector, pretty much. And we give them free space in the class for hosting. So it is worked out beyond our wildest dreams. And I keep telling two of my partners, Mike and Michelle, because they're like, oh, we should do this, we should do that. I'm like, whoa. Last time I checked, we're all fully employed elsewhere. and I do this on my off time, on my weekends, just on a Saturday morning. So But we've seen great success. Got invited out to the state of Wisconsin to do a law enforcement leadership conference at the very, very north end. It was way out in the boondocks. It was about 2.5 hour drive from Minneapolis. But Mike and Michelle went out, had a great time, got great feedback. But if people do well and take one leadership tip, and they use it in their career to get better, then that's a win in our book. That's why we do it.
And you know what? And that's I know for a lot of us that are instructors or we own our own business that provide different leadership or wellness, that's usually, we're just looking for what, if you have 100 people in a room, if we can impact one person, we're very happy about that, because you don't know what you have prevented, or you don't know how you saved them from whatever they may have coming. And it's always cool. I had someone reach out to me on just Facebook. It was actually just this last week. I gave him advice on something in life that I kind of forgot about 5-6 years ago. And he said, "Hey man, I was just thinking about some of the advice you gave me, and I really appreciate what you taught and mentored me." Same thing as an instructor, like as a facilitator. That's what it's yes, the money's good. Don't get me wrong. You always want to get paid for your time, but you really get paid intrinsically when people come back and say, "Hey, you showed me how to do this, and it really helped me with this that came up." So all the things that you guys are doing with M3, your agency, I think is important. I think obviously Oregon is winning. I think Albany stole you from probably a lot of other agencies that could have benefited from you, which is good. And now they're going to hear this and think like, man, maybe we should have took her application too, versus thought differently. But as we start to close out, and I know we're getting to that time, what are some ways people can reach you, whether they want to learn more about the program or programs you're running at Albany, or even your M3? Like, tell us the two different ways, like, because I know it'd be different on both sides. Like, how can people reach you if they're looking for either information on either thing?
Sure. You can read, well, LinkedIn's probably the best. They'll bring the two together. They're both connections for me for both my full-time job as chief of police, and I will share any policy, any program information anybody wants. Again, police work through stealing, things like that. And then there's also connection there for M3. A lot of times I'll cross post some of our victories there and some good leadership points. So that it's a great way to reach out to me. And one other point before I forget it, because I'm old, is I recently took a presentation class online from Simon Sinek, who you know who Simon Sinek is.
Absolutely.
He does an online class, and it really resonated with me. I've never thought of it this way before, but either it's me individually, or Mike, Michelle, or Shannon, or even you, Michael. For us, what we're presenting is about serving others. It's not about us. We're not getting anything back. If I don't hear from somebody in a class, but I know that they got good content out of it and it's sunk in and they're using it, that's what it's all about. It's about serving others and giving them the tools to be successful. It's not about going up and flying to Wisconsin and making money, because we don't, again, it's a job. For us, it's a passion, as it is for you as well. So
yeah,
when we're giving out information, whether I'm doing it as the chief or I'm doing it on behalf of M3, it's about serving other people and getting them the tools that they need to be successful.
And that's what it's all about. And it's funny, you talked about like sometimes people won't give you a reaction. I was speaking in Kyrgyzstan a couple of weeks ago, and their culture is very non-responsive in the sense of, if they're not going to smile, they're not going to really nod their heads too much. So I have 25 delegates in there that I'm speaking to, and to me, for nearly 3 hours, I'm not getting across to any of them in my mind, especially my style and my interaction. And at the end, it was kind of cool because 2 or 3 of them came and say, "Hey man, are you coming to our next training in a couple of months? Are you going to come speak again?" Another guy reached out to me. So even though you may not see the immediate result in the room, you're probably going to hear about it later on. And that's, once again, that's kind of the part that we do it for, because I was just thinking about that. I was like, I thought I bombed it. I was like, man, I was horrible. My back was sweat. Like it was rough. But it's about them at the end of the day. And Simon Sinek is 100% right. And whenever I teach about presentation skills, I'm like, hey, one of the first things I tell people is it's about your audience. It's not about you. Your goal, your job is to deliver them strong information that's going to make them better today than they were yesterday. That's the goal. And if you if you're able to do that, whether or not they react, at least you told them with the care that it was for them. And people know when you care and you don't care. They know when you're just being voluntold or you're just clicking through the PowerPoint. They know. But when they see the passion, they see the drive, that's what's going to make a difference in their hearts, especially. Any final words, anything you would love to share that you want the audiences to kind of resonate in their mind as they continue on with their day?
Well, you have mostly law enforcement audience, I suspect, and probably others. I'll leave you with a question I ask my up and coming leaders here at the agency, and we do it in the M3 classes as well. As you think about your leadership style and the work you've put in towards leadership, what do you want your legacy to be? What will people say about Michael, Marcia, or any other leader out there? What legacy are you leaving behind as far as your leadership? And so that is something I always want leaders to think about as they step away, because what we do matters. How we treat people and care for people and lead people matters. And so think about your legacy. Do you want people to say, "Oh God, she was such a bitch," or something like that? Pardon my language.
It's true.
Or do we want to be remembered like, yeah, that person was there when I needed them. They really lifted me up. They made me better at my job, whatever the case may be. They cared about me. What do you want your legacy to be? Because we all have an expiration date in our jobs. And so making sure that you have met your mission. My personal mission is leaving people in the situation better than I found it. And that's what I want my legacy to be.
Man, if everybody could just hear that, legacy is so important. And for me, I know it's something that I built on my business. Actually, my tagline, it is simple: create your legacy. It's been my tagline since 2017, since I opened my business and start working on my own leadership development, because it's true. I mean, what people are going to remember is how you treated them and how you cared for them, and the different programs you're offering Albany, the different trainings and seminars you're bringing from the M3 side. People know the passion. That's why we connected. That's why I was like, hey, let me get you on the podcast. After I saw your passion and I saw how you guys present, I was like, hey, this is somebody I would love to have to continue to humanize what I'm trying to do on this show, and showing people that there's other outlets, there's other ways to grow. And while we have this conversation about a few different things, at the end of the day, it's about giving people a chance to enhance themselves and leave a legacy by different things and resources that are out there. So, Marcia, I do appreciate your time. I know you're busy with everything you have going on. The fact that you were able to give us your time today, we really appreciate it. I know people are going to gain things from it. If you guys haven't done so, make sure you check out Marcia, check out her LinkedIn page. Look for what she's doing in Albany, and definitely look for what she's doing at M3, because we want to turn some of these speaking engagements, some of these trainings into highly paid gigs as well. We don't want her to keep using all her money she makes from Albany to do this, because at the end of the day, the electricity has to be paid as well. The food stores don't say, hey, you're a great person, I'm not going to get. So she has bills to pay too. So, but I know her heart's there, and the more we can get her out there, the more we can see that success and people building a legacy. I appreciate everybody listening, and I look forward to hearing from you guys and seeing you on the next show. You guys have a great day.
You've been listening to the LEO First Podcast. Michael has been in law enforcement since 2005. He's worked for 3 law enforcement agencies in 3 different states. He's a professional speaker who travels the country teaching about leadership development and self-awareness. And he's the author of a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge: The 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. It's Michael's passion to bring law enforcement members' stories to the front, so you get the real and raw take. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with Michael on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Michael Laidler, on Twitter at Michael A. Laidler, on Facebook at Michael Laidler Leadership. Send an email to michael@michaelalaidler.com and hit the website at michaelalaidler.com. See you next time on the LEO First Podcast.